We'll begin by remembering our healthcare workers. We begin with a message of solidarity and encouragement to our healthcare workers. We are encouraged and grateful for the continued dedication and sacrifice by those in the front lines of Kenya's struggle against coronavirus. Our deepest gratitude to healthcare workers across the Republic who, despite an imperfect working environment, continue to ensure that those in need receive the help they deserve. Our heart goes out to those who we have lost in the line of duty, including but not limited to the ones we lost recently: Doreen Lugaliki, Peter Kiarie, Miriam Awor, Abdi Yusuf, Clifford Manyara, and Moses Ringera. May their loved ones find healing and courage in their sacrifice. To date, more than 700 healthcare workers have tested positive for the COVID-19. Yet most cannot access the healthcare services they need to save their lives and their loved ones. As we speak, healthcare workers are on strike in Homa Bay County, with other counties likely to follow, unless quick corrective action is taken by both county and national governments. We find it unacceptable that despite their critical role at this moment, healthcare workers still go for months without salary and work with insufficient and or substandard personal protective equipment. They lack medical insurance to access healthcare services they provide for other Kenyans, and have absolutely no compensation mechanism for those who die in the line of duty, leaving families with millions in medical bills that they must pay for before they can bury their loved ones. We find this morally incomprehensible. We gather here today to reflect on the state of our nation 148 days since that day in March, since the first recorded coronavirus case in Kenya. Since that day in March, the government, together with partners and key stakeholders, have taken measures to evaluate what is meant for our people's health, education, economy, and ability to put food on their plates. The Federation of Kenya Employers reports that 2 months after the announcement of the first case, over 342,000 Kenyans had lost their jobs. In an economy that was already bleeding from official corruption, mismanagement, debt bulging long before Corona, the Kenya Bureau of Statistics reported by May 2020, up to 1/3 of Kenyans were unable to pay rent, while 43% of the active labor force was unable to find work due to the effects of the corona pandemic. Multiple companies have closed down, more than resized their workforce, and the kibarua economy lies in ruins across urban and rural Kenya. Simply put, majority of Kenyans cannot afford to be alive. We are aware that to date, the government has received billions from external partners, reallocated and appropriated billions from the last budget, including through supplementary budgets, allocated more billions in the current budget, and received billions from individual well-wishers and private businesses and entities in Kenya. It is reasonable to expect a more robust, transparent, and humane response by the government. But that has not been the case. Instead, the pandemic seems to have opened floodgates for abuse of public finance, unreasonable flouting of procurement laws, and abuse of supplementary budget for purposes that are not consistent with public interest. We are appalled that less than 4 years since the Mafia House scandal, we are seeing new revelations of theft and abuse of healthcare monies by public servants, their close relatives, and partners in crime at a time when millions of Kenyans cannot simply afford to live. Though predictable, President Kenyatta's silence in the face of this repeat performance is regrettable, even as the government shifts the corona burden from the state to citizens through a chorus of personal responsibility and self-care. As Kenyans face rising infections, including among neglected frontline healthcare workers, questionable state of preparedness at county and national levels, and a worsening socio-economic situation, Kenya needs immediate relief, accountability, and a credible roadmap in dealing with the pandemic. As Kenyans, we must now make legitimate and urgent demands for a better, more responsive, ethical, and empathetic leadership. We are convinced that President Kenyatta and the government have failed in their duty to care for the citizens. In the last 3 years, multiple opinion polls have highlighted with significant clarity that what the people of Kenya consider to be their pressing needs, all of which have become even more urgent with the corona pandemic. These include basic needs for all, that is food, shelter, security from arbitrary eviction, quality and accessible and affordable health care, and protection of livelihoods and economic opportunities that can sustain the ordinary citizen. President Kenyatta and his government have ignored these pressing needs, preferring their private and political priorities. Billions of shillings are being spent on projects with questionable public utility value. Billions more have been spent on building bridges where there are no rivers. In essence, a breaking bridges initiative. We can no longer accept to tie the destiny of tens of millions of Kenyans to the short-term and selfish desires of a heartless leadership. We state unequivocally that President Kenyatta's private interests and 2022 succession must not be forced down the throats of Kenyans when his government remains incapable of doing what governments are supposed to do, which is take care of citizens and do no harm to them. At a moment of great anxiety and vulnerability, both state-led corruption and a misplaced obsession with succession politics are hurting Kenya's constitutional right to health care, education, food, shelter, and jobs. For these many reasons, and we demand the following from President Kenyatta and his government. 1, an immediate end to the long-drawn confusion and lack of leadership in the education sector. Comprehensively address growing concerns by parents about the fate and future of education. We do not believe that putting our children's education on hold for a year is acceptable. Parents and learners need to see leadership that inspires confidence and the message that the government knows what it is doing. A leadership that consults widely. this is not the case. We need a full disclosure, transparency, and accountability for all the COVID-19 funds, resources, and equipment from all sources, including loans, grants, donations, in-kind, and support, both locally and internationally. We demand the government publishes and makes accessible the roster of beneficiaries of the government COVID-19 relief funds and PPEs to date. We further demand that the government reallocates and redirect significant national government budget and resources to health, reverse unreasonable additional COVID-19 response-related budget allocations from national security to public health. The government must abandon their business as usual approach and prioritize the health and well-being of Kenyans, which includes protection of livelihoods for informal workers and businesses, as well as the chronically unemployed. We demand that the government investigates, arrests, and successfully prosecutes thieves at Afya House and across government who have stolen or made it possible to steal and or abuse COVID-19 response monies and other resources. Not a single person has ever been prosecuted for the Mafia House scandal of 2016, despite government promising to do so. We demand accountability. President Kenyatta must address the endemic corruption in the health sector, including the repeated adverse mention of people close to him. The national government must meet the medical costs for all healthcare workers diagnosed with COVID-19. We find the state of public health dire and the situation of healthcare workers morally unacceptable in the middle of a public health emergency of this magnitude. To demonstrate a duty of care for our healthcare workers, we demand immediate and unconditional payment of all delayed salaries and benefits to healthcare workers, immediate provision of quality and sufficient personal protective equipment for all healthcare workers, and that county and national governments provide comprehensive medical insurance to all frontline healthcare workers and their families. That the national government implements a compensation package for all frontline healthcare workers who lose their lives during the duration of the pandemic. We also demand that the government provide cash transfers for all Kenyans in need and suspend all HELB, that is Higher Education Loans Board payments. Our mobile money capabilities makes it easy for efficient and traceable transfer of cash to the needy. It is moments like this that credible, legitimate governments show their citizens the direct and more personalized benefit of their taxes. Additionally, in the wake of the unprecedented job losses and dire economic situation, the Higher Education Loans Board must suspend compulsory repayments for at least 24 months for those who need the relief. We also demand that the government provides cash grants to medium, small, and micro enterprises, which are the engine of our economy. Yet we continue to see a fixation with the 1% of big businesses who are politically connected and have superior lobbying power. We demand a stop to these reckless actions bordering on harassment of legitimate businesses, causing unnecessary harm to those trying to survive the pandemic. We've already said we demand cash grants to MSMEs and greater consultation and engagement. We also demand an immediate remittance of all funds due to the counties. This consistent and deliberate delay in remitting funds to the county governments and usurping county functions is at the center of sabotage against devolution. We also demand that the government discloses and reallocates BBI funds to COVID-19 response and recovery. We demand an account of all the money that has been allocated and or spent on BBI projects, including foreign support and or assistance. We demand the immediate cessation of these activities and the reallocation of the resources to COVID-19. Last but not least, public health policy and resource decision-making must move from State House and the Office of the President back to the Ministry of Health, where they belong. Health is a devolved function, and it is untenable that the bulk of health resources are centralized at State House. We demand health allocation to counties be commensurate with the devolved responsibility. The concentration of decision-making at the center is not only unconstitutional, but it's also emerging as an enabler of corruption, nepotism, and patronage. Finally, we want to thank Kenyans for their steadfast support for one another through numerous acts of generosity in spirit and resources in a way that reflects the importance of individual and collective responsibility. Kenyans have patience, but our patience is worn thin. We deserve better than the government apathy and neglect we are witnessing. We need universal health access, a definitive end to state-led corruption, social safety nets for the vulnerable families, and credible participatory plans for getting children back to learning. For all practical purposes, I want to end by saying the government has collapsed. The only thing that seems to be functioning in this government is misprocurement. Not procurement, misprocurement, taxation, they never fail in that one, and political patronage. Surely we deserve better. We aim our criticism, which is constructive criticism to the government, whom we pay to find answers. But I'll say this, there is obvious lack of leadership in the education sector. We can't keep on having flip-flop in what will happen to the students. And these blanket statements that all students and pupils will repeat a whole year. Nobody is telling us who will pay the fees. Parents are already strained. And we all know what a year of not being in school means even to a young child, leave alone those who are doing their exams. We need a consultative and credible leadership that engages all stakeholders, not just some of them. There are innovative ways of ensuring, for instance, that those who are due to do exams do them. I don't want to go on the failed laptop project, because had it succeeded, then e-learning would have been easy. Because nothing seems to succeed in this government except misprocurement, as we have said, patronage and corruption, state-led corruption. So we are saying, without going into details, there are innovative ways if the government could only listen to the citizens, to the stakeholders. I am watching my grandchildren and children of around that age, primary school and some secondary school going, the agony they have of not knowing when they will do for exams. The Form 4s and Standard 8s were already very busy preparing for exams. Now they are preparing without knowing when. These are the issues that must be discussed and innovative and consultative solutions arrived at.
Thank you.
Yeah. So shall we?
Yes, I think we can take that.
I think on health, we mentioned the Mafia House scandal of 2016. We are therefore holding the president to account for what is going on now. The CS really must take responsibility, act to redress or take full responsibility for the wrong things that are happening. And I do think it is not his duty to explain exorbitant costs of PPEs. That should never be his business. Let him list down what has been received and how it has been allocated, both PPEs and money, and let him act. He also admitted there were misfits in Afia House or Mafia House. He is the boss of Afia House now. He has to choose whether to be the boss of Mafia House or Afia House. But the buck stops with the president. Now we have an elected government which we are holding to account in this press conference. I don't remember electing Atwori or Morade, so I will not comment on what they say. Anybody is entitled to their opinion. Now, we have been told that we are making open-ended demands. I do not know what that means, but I know that it is not legitimate for anybody to shift functions of government which has resources and state machinery to an opposition party. Our duty is to hold government to account and to keep on putting pressure in whatever way we find available to us, and that we will continue doing. The issue of the revenue stalemate in the Senate, from where we sit, our government has set its people upon each other. There is a majority party, there is a minority party. Although they have merged, they are enjoying the perks of those offices. Why hasn't the leadership of those two parties, the top leadership, unlocked the stalemate? The Constitution emphasizes on consultation, cooperation, and negotiations. Why are we reaching a stage where we see as though counties are fighting one another? We also want to challenge the president and his government. What happened to the Equalization Fund, Article 204? If it had been applied in the last 8 years of this Jubilee administration and allocated sufficient money, today we would not be talking of marginalized counties. We would be talking of almost equal services in the rest of the country. So let the Senate consult, engage one another, come with a solution. We did not send them to Senate to fight each other. We sent them to find solutions. We expect nothing less. Should we expect fair elections in 2022? Not as currently constituted. And that is why Kenyans must not be distracted by the Breaking Bridges initiative. We must marshal our energies together to see what we need to do about the electoral process by properly implementing the Constitution, not amending it. Because this Constitution has solutions, even in putting right what is not right in the electoral process. Thank you. Revenue, I'm not going to preempt the negotiations that are going on in the Senate. I think this would be the wrong time to pick my preference. But remember the Commission on Revenue Allocation had given its recommendation. I've already said that had the government operationalized Article 204, the what is it called? The Equalization Fund, which nobody is talking about and for which nobody has asked for accountability. The push and pull would not be there because the Equalization Fund directly targets the lack of infrastructure in the hitherto marginalized counties. So it is the fact that we are living as though the Constitution is not there that is bringing this push and pull, and also the lack of accountability at both the national and the county levels. Now, about the tours of CS Health, they are PR tours from where I stand. He has targeted counties that are doing relatively well than others. That is why he reached Embu and did not go to Kirinyaga, which has no infrastructure. Instead, the director of Kenyatta National Hospital is the one who went to Kirinyaga to aggregate the beds in the sub-county hospitals to show up the 14